You are the first person to see it from above, not the first person to see it at all. The operators in the control room saw the gauges go wrong. The firefighters on the roof saw the graphite. The plant workers saw the sky where the ceiling should have been. But you are the first person to see the whole thing. From 200 meters up in the cockpit of your Mi-8, banking over the reactor building at dawn on April 27th, you look down through the side window and you see what the explosion made of reactor number 4. The roof is gone, not collapsed inward. Gone. Blown outward and upward and scattered across the surrounding area. The top of the building is open to the sky. A ragged, irregular opening, perhaps 30 meters across, and inside the opening you can see the reactor core. The reactor core is glowing, not the orange glow of fire, something else. A deep, blue-white light, steady and sourceless, coming from inside the core. Cherenkov radiation. You do not know this term yet. You will learn it later. Right now you are a military helicopter pilot who has been flying in the Soviet Air Force for 12 years, and you are looking at something that has no category in your experience. You look at it for the 3 seconds it takes to pass over. Then the reactor is behind you. You complete the survey pass. You land. They ask you what you saw. You tell them. They tell you to go back. This is a story about the view from above. Every other person in this series has been on the ground. The operator at his console, the firefighter on the roof, the liquidator in the tunnel, the resident packing her suitcase, the scientist in his laboratory, the miner at the face, the KGB officer in his office. They all saw Chernobyl from the ground, from inside it, from the specific limited perspective of a person who is in a place and cannot see past the boundaries of that place. The helicopter pilots saw everything. From 200 meters above the open reactor, the whole disaster was visible at once. The destroyed building, the spread of radioactive debris across the surrounding area, the contamination patterns, the scale of the damage. The pilots had what nobody on the ground had, the complete picture, visible in a single glance every time they flew over. What they also had was 200 meters between themselves and the open core, 200 meters of air. Air provides almost no shielding against the radiation coming from an open reactor core. The metal walls of the helicopter provide some, not much. The pilots were receiving significant radiation doses with every pass. They made dozens of passes. Some made over 100 passes over the course of the operation. They flew their routes and dropped their loads and went back for more loads and flew again. His name was Andrei. He was 34 years old, a major in the Soviet military aviation, an experienced Mi-8 pilot with thousands of hours. He had flown in difficult conditions before: weather, low visibility, complex approaches. He had not flown over an open nuclear reactor before. Nobody had. There was no training for this. There was no protocol. There was a mission, and there were pilots, and the pilots flew the mission. In this story, you are Andrei. The rotors are turning. The reactor is below you. The dosimeter on the instrument panel is reading something you have been told not to look at too carefully. In this story, you are the pilot. The sky above you is clear. The reactor below you is open. You have a job to do, and the job requires you to fly directly over the most radioactive place on Earth again and again until the job is done. You have been flying since you were 22. Military aviation. The Soviet Air Force took you at 18 for the standard conscription, and by the second month, they had identified what they were looking for in your aptitude tests and your reflexes and your specific combination of spatial reasoning and physical coordination that flight selection looks for. You were assigned to aviation training. You accepted without hesitation, because aviation training was the best possible outcome of military service, and because the idea of flying had been with you since you were small, since you watched the aircraft crossing the sky above your village in Siberia, and understood, in the way that children understand things they cannot articulate, that you would do that. You fly Mi-8 helicopters. The Mi-8 is a Soviet military transport helicopter, a large twin-engine aircraft designed to carry troops and equipment in conditions that fixed-wing aircraft cannot access. It is not elegant, it is not fast, it is built for utility, for reliability, for the specific ruggedness that military aviation in the Soviet system requires. You know this aircraft the way you know your own body. Its sounds, its responses, its specific weight in the air, the way it handles in crosswinds and at altitude and in heat. You have flown it in Siberia and in Central Asia and in training exercises, in every kind of weather. You trust it. What the Mi-8 is not designed for is nuclear environments. No helicopter is. The concept of a helicopter specifically hardened against radiation does not exist in 1986. The aircraft has metal walls and instruments and crew, and the metal walls provide some gamma shielding, and the instruments provide no shielding at all, and the crew provides whatever biological resilience they were born with and nothing else. When they told you the mission, you asked about protection. The officer who briefed you said, "Lead aprons for the crew. Limit passes to the minimum time over the target. Dosimeters for everyone." You said, "And the aircraft?" He said, "The aircraft will be monitored and rotated as needed." You understood. This meant there was no special protection for the aircraft. You understood that the aircraft was a tool, and the tool would be used until it needed to be replaced. You are also a tool. You understand this too. You climb in. You run through the pre-flight. Before your first pass over the reactor, you are briefed by a scientist. He is from the Nuclear Institute. He tells you the parameters: altitude, speed, approach angle. He tells you the payload: bags of sand and lead and boron, to be dropped into the open core, to suppress the reaction and absorb the radiation. He tells you the time limit over the target: as short as possible, no hovering, drop and continue. He tells you the dosimeter limit: when the needle hour reaches the red zone, return to base for crew rotation. He does not tell you what the color of the glow means. You ask. He says it is Cherenkov radiation. He says it is the light produced by charged particles, moving through air faster than light can move through air. He says it is not fire. You nod. You have never seen anything that is not fire, but looks like fire. You are about to. The approach is from the south. You come in low over the plant complex, following the route the briefing specified, the reactor building ahead and to the left, the morning sun, low behind you, casting your shadow forward across the plant grounds. Below you, the plant is organized and familiar. The same kind of industrial facility you have flown over dozens of times. The cooling towers, the turbine halls, the administrative buildings, the network of roads and pipes and cables that a large industrial installation requires. Except for Reactor Number 4, the reactor building is wrong from 100 meters away. Wrong in the way that a building is wrong when it has been damaged beyond the category of damage, into the category of transformation. When what was built has been unmade by something, and what remains is not the building, but the evidence of the building's former existence. The roof is gone. You knew this from the briefing. You have been told the roof is gone, that the explosion destroyed the upper section of the building, that the reactor core is open to the sky. Knowing this and seeing it are different. The open sky above a reactor building is not something the mind accepts immediately. A reactor building is a structure of containment. Its entire purpose is to contain, to hold, to separate the interior from the exterior. The gap where the roof was is the containment failing, the containment becoming not just inadequate but absent, the interior and the exterior, now the same space. You bank slightly to the left, you look down. The core, the Cherenkov radiation. The scientist told you the word, but the word did not prepare you for the thing. It is a blue-white light, deep and steady, coming from the center of the opening. Not flickering, not moving, steady. The steadiness of it is more disturbing than movement would be. Fire moves. Fire is dynamic and familiar, and the movement of it is part of what fire is. This light does not move, it simply radiates evenly from the open wound of the reactor, as if the reactor is illuminated from within by something that has its own rules about how light behaves. You are over it for 3 seconds, then you are past it. You complete the survey pass. You go around the full perimeter of the plant at low altitude, noting the debris spread, the contamination patterns, the condition of the surrounding buildings. You note everything. Your training is to note everything. You land and you give your report, and the report is received and logged, and the scientists cross-reference it with the dosimeter readings. They tell you to go back. The dosimeter reading after your first pass is higher than you expected. Not off scale, but high. You note it in the logbook. The officer watching you note it says nothing. You understand that the officer watching you note it is also watching every other pilot note it, and that the numbers in all the logbooks are being compared against the operational requirements, and the operational requirements will determine when each pilot is rotated out. You understand that your continued participation in the operation depends partly on how fast you accumulate dose. This creates a specific incentive that you do not examine closely. The payload changes over the weeks. In the first days, sand and lead. The sand to smother the burning graphite and suppress the fire. The lead to provide radiation shielding over the open core, a layer of dense metal between the radioactive material and the sky. The bags are loaded by ground crews and the helicopter flies to the hover point above the reactor and the crewmen push the bags out of the open door and the bags fall. This sounds straightforward. It is not straightforward. Hovering directly over an open reactor core at 200 meters requires precision that normal cargo drops do not require. The bags need to land in the core opening, which is perhaps 30 meters across from this altitude, which sounds large until you are hovering in rotor wash above a destroyed building, trying to drop bags through a specific opening, while your dosimeter is reading things you are trying not to focus on. The rotor wash complicates everything. A helicopter in hover generates a significant downward airflow from its rotors. This downward airflow, striking the reactor building below, deflects in all directions. Some of it goes down into the core, some of it goes outward. The outward portion carries with it whatever is in the air above the reactor, including radioactive particles that the open core is releasing. The rotor wash takes these particles and disperses them into the surrounding area and into the airspace through which the helicopter is flying. You are hovering in the dispersed radioactive particles. You drop the bags, you pull up and bank away. You go back to the loading area. You load more bags, you go back. Later, the payload includes boron. Boron absorbs neutrons and helps dampen the nuclear reaction. Then dolomite to reduce carbon dioxide production from the burning graphite. Then clay and sand mixed together for better density. The scientists are working through the physics of what will help and what the helicopter crews are dropping is the result of those calculations made in real time, each material tried and assessed and replaced by the next as the situation evolves. You are flying the experiments. Each payload is a scientific hypothesis about how to suppress an open nuclear reactor. You are the delivery system for the hypotheses. You learn the reactor from above. After a dozen passes, you know the opening as well as you know an airfield. Its dimensions, its position relative to the surrounding structure, the specific landmarks that you use to judge your approach and your release point. You know which wind conditions make the approach harder and which make it easier. You know the specific turbulence pattern that the building creates at your altitude, the way the rotor wash interacts with the building's edges and produces a slight pitch change that you compensate for automatically. You know the glow. The Cherenkov radiation is always there, day and night. The passes you make in daylight show the glow less dramatically against the bright sky, but it is there. A deep, blue-white luminescence rising from the core. The passes at dusk or early morning show it more clearly, the glow asserting itself against the darker sky, with a brightness that is wrong. That is the wrong brightness for the wrong reason. You look at it every pass. You cannot not look at it. The human eye goes to the anomaly. It goes to the thing that is different from what should be there, the thing that violates the expectation, the thing that says, this is not right. The glow violates every expectation. It is light where there should not be light. It is the wrong color of light. It is the wrong kind of light. It is the inside of a nuclear reactor exposed to the open sky, radiating the specific light of physics, operating at the extreme end of what physics produces, and every time you fly over it, your eye goes to it before your mind can redirect your eye to the instrument panel where your eye is supposed to be. 3 seconds. Every pass approximately 3 seconds over the opening, 3 seconds of the glow. Then you are past it. Then you bank and turn and go back for the next load. On your 14th pass, You look down, and you see what the previous 13 passes have not shown you clearly. A man on the roof of an adjacent building, someone in protective gear, standing at the edge of a roof that overlooks the reactor opening, looking down. You do not know who he is. You do not know what he is doing there. You fly past. Later, you think about him. The man on the roof, looking down at what you have been looking at from above. Two people seeing the same thing from different angles. Two different versions of the wrong light in the wrong place. You wonder what he thought it looked like from his angle. You wonder if the scale was different. You wonder if the thing you understood as a bright point from above looked different when you were closer to it and could see the specific details, rather than the overall shape. 3 people in the aircraft on each mission. You fly. The co-pilot manages navigation and secondary systems. The flight engineer monitors the aircraft's mechanical condition and manages the payload release. On some missions, there is a 4th crew member, a scientist or a dosimetry specialist, who records the readings and directs the approach for precision drops. Your co-pilot is Victor. Victor is 29. He's been flying for 7 years. He is technically very good. His instrument flying is precise. His emergency procedures are clean. His spatial awareness in complex approaches is the kind that takes years to develop and that you noticed in him immediately when you started flying together 18 months ago. He is also, and this is something you have not articulated directly, but have observed over many flights, a person who processes fear through silence. Victor is very silent on these missions, not inoperative. He does his job. He calls out the altitudes and the airspeeds and the payload release points with complete accuracy. But between the call-outs, there is a quality to his silence that is different from the normal working silence of a cockpit. A denser silence. The silence of a man who is using all available mental resources to maintain the professional exterior and has none left over for conversation. You do not comment on this. You understand it. You have your own version of it. Your version is that you focus on the specific technical problems of each pass with a completeness that leaves no room for the other kind of thinking. The approach angle, the wind correction, the release timing, the pull-up. Each of these is a problem with a solution. And you work the solution, and the working of the solution occupies the space where the other thinking would go. This is the professional skill of the aviator in difficult conditions. It is also, you understand, a form of not looking at something directly. You look at the technical problems. You do not look at the dosimeter unless you have to. The flight engineer, Nikolai, keeps careful records. He records every pass, the altitude, the payload, the estimated drop accuracy, the dosimeter readings at key points of each pass. He records these things in a logbook that he maintains with the specific neatness of a man who was told at some point in his life that neat records are important and who has never stopped believing it. After each mission, he reviews the logbook with you and Victor. The 3 of you look at the numbers. The dosimeter numbers go up with each pass, and each day you track the accumulated totals. You do not discuss what the totals mean. You discuss the next mission's payload and approach, and the wind forecast, and the technical elements. The numbers are there in the logbook. You all know what the numbers mean. You do not say it. On the 9th day of the operation, a helicopter goes down. Not your helicopter. Another Mi-8, a different crew, on a morning pass. A cable from a construction crane, one of the cranes involved in the sarcophagus construction that has begun around the reactor, catches the tail rotor. The aircraft loses tail rotor control immediately. With a tail rotor failure in a helicopter, the aircraft will rotate in the opposite direction from the main rotor. The torque of the main rotor no longer balanced. The pilot has seconds to manage the auto-rotation, to bring the aircraft down in a controlled descent before the rotation becomes uncontrollable. The seconds are not enough. The helicopter comes down in the plant grounds, near the reactor building. It is on fire when it hits the ground. All 4 crew members die. You are in the air when it happens. You're on your approach for a morning pass, and you see the aircraft go down at your 2 o'clock position, and you watch it hit the ground, and you watch the fire. You complete your pass, you drop your payload, you pull up and bank away, and you return to the loading area. Nobody tells you to stop flying. Nobody asks if you want to stop flying. You do not ask to stop flying. This is the thing about military aviation in the Soviet Union in 1986 that is difficult to explain to someone who was not inside it. The stopping is not an available option in the way that stopping is available in a civilian context. You are a military officer on an active operation. The operation has a purpose. The purpose requires the operation to continue. The accident is a tragedy. It is also a data point. The crane position is noted. Future approach routes will account for it. The operation continues. You fly 3 more passes that day. You do not look at the site of the crash when you fly over it. You look at the core. You drop your payload. You come back. At the end of the day, you and Victor and Nikolai sit together in the crew tent. You eat. You do not talk about the crash. This is not denial. You know what happened. You know who the crew was. Not well. You had spoken to them perhaps twice, but you knew them. You know they are dead. You know they died doing what you are doing. All of this is known. What there is to say about it has been said inside your head dozens of times since this morning and does not require saying out loud. Saying it out loud would only make the knowing louder, and the knowing is already as loud as you can manage. At night you lie on your cot in the tent and you look at the ceiling. The tent ceiling is canvas, khaki-colored, with the specific texture of military canvas that has been through many uses and many weathers. There is a light on a stand at the end of the tent. Some of the men are asleep. Some are awake. You are awake. Your body is not tired in the ordinary way of a tired body. The fatigue of the reactor missions is not the muscular fatigue of physical work or the mental fatigue of complex problem-solving. It is something else, a drain. The feeling of a resource being drawn down that is not the ordinary resource of energy and attention. You do not have a name for it. Later, reading accounts of other people who worked at the site, you will recognize the description of this feeling in their words. The specific exhaustion that comes from sustained exposure to something the body is working to manage at a level below consciousness. But at night, the sky is very clear. You step outside the tent sometimes. Not for long, not for any particular reason. You stand outside the tent in the dark and you look up at the stars. The sky above the exclusion zone is the same sky as everywhere else. The same stars, the same Milky Way. The same cold spring night that the rest of Ukraine is experiencing, the rest of the Soviet Union. But if you turn and look south, toward the plant, you can see it, even at night, even from this distance. A faint glow above the reactor building, not the orange of fire, the specific blue-white that you know from above, visible from the ground, visible from a kilometer away, in the dark, the reactor illuminating the sky above it with its own wrong light. You look at it. You go back inside. Tomorrow you fly over it again. You think about what it looks like from space. You have no way to know. In 1986, there are no public satellite images of this kind available to a Soviet military pilot. But you think about it. The reactor, as seen from orbit, the specific dot of wrong light on the surface of the Earth, visible from hundreds of kilometers up, the planet's surface interrupted at one point by something that did not exist 2 weeks ago. You wonder if the cosmonauts on the Mir space station can see it. You wonder if they look down at Ukraine on their passes over and notice the light that should not be there. You wonder if anyone who sees it from above, from really above, from space, understands what they are looking at. On the 9th day of the operation, a helicopter goes down. Not your helicopter. Another Mi-8, a different crew, on a morning pass. A cable from a construction crane, one of the cranes involved in the sarcophagus construction that has begun around the reactor, catches the tail rotor. The aircraft loses tail rotor control immediately. With a tail rotor failure in a helicopter, the aircraft will rotate in the opposite direction from the main rotor. The torque of the main rotor no longer balanced. The pilot has seconds to manage the auto-rotation, to bring the aircraft down in a controlled descent before the rotation becomes uncontrollable. The seconds are not enough. The helicopter comes down in the plant grounds, near the reactor building. It is on fire when it hits the ground. All 4 crew members die. You are in the air when it happens. You're on your approach for a morning pass, and you see the aircraft go down at your 2 o'clock position, and you watch it hit the ground, and you watch the fire. You complete your pass, you drop your payload, you pull up and bank away, and you return to the loading area. Nobody tells you to stop flying. Nobody asks if you want to stop flying. You do not ask to stop flying. This is the thing about military aviation in the Soviet Union in 1986 that is difficult to explain to someone who was not inside it. The stopping is not an available option in the way that stopping is available in a civilian context. You are a military officer on an active operation. The operation has a purpose. The purpose requires the operation to continue. The accident is a tragedy. It is also a data point. The crane position is noted. Future approach routes will account for it. The operation continues. You fly 3 more passes that day. You do not look at the site of the crash when you fly over it. You look at the core. You drop your payload. You come back. At the end of the day, you and Victor and Nikolai sit together in the crew tent. You eat. You do not talk about the crash. This is not denial. You know what happened. You know who the crew was. Not well. You had spoken to them perhaps twice, but you knew them. You know they are dead. You know they died doing what you are doing. All of this is known. What there is to say about it has been said inside your head dozens of times since this morning and does not require saying out loud. Saying it out loud would only make the knowing louder, and the knowing is already as loud as you can manage. At night you lie on your cot in the tent and you look at the ceiling. The tent ceiling is canvas, khaki-colored, with the specific texture of military canvas that has been through many uses and many weathers. There is a light on a stand at the end of the tent. Some of the men are asleep. Some are awake. You are awake. Your body is not tired in the ordinary way of a tired body. The fatigue of the reactor missions is not the muscular fatigue of physical work or the mental fatigue of complex problem-solving. It is something else, a drain. The feeling of a resource being drawn down that is not the ordinary resource of energy and attention. You do not have a name for it. Later, reading accounts of other people who worked at the site, you will recognize the description of this feeling in their words. The specific exhaustion that comes from sustained exposure to something the body is working to manage at a level below consciousness. But at night, the sky is very clear. You step outside the tent sometimes. Not for long. Not for any particular reason. You stand outside the tent in the dark and you look up at the stars. The sky above the exclusion zone is the same sky as everywhere else. The same stars, the same Milky Way. The same cold spring night that the rest of Ukraine is experiencing, the rest of the Soviet Union. But if you turn and look south, toward the plant, you can see it. Even at night. Even from this distance. A faint glow above the reactor building, not the orange of fire, the specific blue-white that you know from above, visible from the ground, visible from a kilometer away. In the dark, the reactor illuminating the sky above it with its own wrong light. You look at it. You go back inside. Tomorrow you fly over it again. You think about what it looks like from space. You have no way to know. In 1986, there are no public satellite images of this kind available to a Soviet military pilot. But you think about it. The reactor, as seen from orbit, the specific dot of wrong light on the surface of the Earth, visible from hundreds of kilometers up, the planet's surface interrupted at one point by something that did not exist 2 weeks ago. You wonder if the cosmonauts on the Mir space station can see it. You wonder if they look down at Ukraine on their passes over and notice the light that should not be there. You wonder if anyone who sees it from above, from really above, from space, understands what they are looking at. By the end of the operation, you have made 63 passes over the open reactor core. 63 passes at approximately 3 seconds each is approximately 3 minutes of direct exposure to the radiation field above the open core, plus the accumulated exposure from the approaches and departures, and the rotor wash dispersal effect, and the general radiation environment of the exclusion zone where you have been living and working for weeks. The total dose is recorded in your logbook. You do not look at the total dose number often. You know it is high. You know it is significantly higher than the dose you were told was the limit for the operation. The limit was the stated limit when the operation began. The operation did not end when individuals reached the limit. The operation ended when the engineers determined that sufficient material had been dropped into the core to begin suppressing the reaction, which happened over weeks, long after many of the crews had exceeded the stated limits. This is not a surprise. You understood from the beginning that the stated limits were targets rather than absolute stops. This is how military operations work in conditions where the operation has a defined necessity. The limits are the preference. The necessity is the constraint. When necessity and preference conflict, necessity wins. You knew this. You flew anyway. This is not stupidity. This is not blind obedience. This is the specific calculation of a military pilot in 1986 who understood that the thing over which he was flying represented a danger, not just to him but to millions of people, and that the work of suppressing it was his work, and that the work was going to cost him something, and that the something was acceptable given what was at stake. You made the calculation 63 times. The dosimeter readings from the Chernobyl helicopter operation were not always accurately recorded. Some crews recorded lower doses than their instruments showed, either because they were managing their cumulative totals against the limit or because they did not want to be rotated out before the operation was complete. Others recorded accurately. The result is that the actual doses received by the helicopter crews are difficult to reconstruct precisely. What is known is that the doses were high, significantly higher than the stated limits for many crews, and that the health effects in the years following the operation reflect this. Exact numbers are debated. The bodies of the men who flew the missions are not. Your last pass over the reactor is in the morning. The operation has been running for weeks. The open core has received hundreds of tons of material from the airdrops, and the reaction is visibly suppressed compared to the early days. The glow is less intense. The scientists tell you the temperature readings are lower. The sarcophagus construction on the ground has progressed to the point where the aerial operation is being wound down. You're told this is your last pass. You approach from the south as you always approach, the same route you have flown 62 times before. The plant is familiar from this angle, in the way that any place becomes familiar after you have approached it the same way more than 60 times. The reactor building is identifiable from 3 kilometers out. You know its position relative to the other buildings, the cooling towers, the turbine halls. You know the approach landmarks. You make the approach. You come in at altitude. You look down. The glow is still there, fainter than the first pass, significantly fainter. The hundreds of tons of material in the core have done what the engineers intended: suppressed the reaction, reduced the temperature, diminished the radiation release from the open top. The core is not dead. It will not be dead for years, decades, centuries, but it is less open than it was. The sarcophagus is beginning to cover it. The wrong light is beginning to be contained. You are over it for 3 seconds. The same 3 seconds as always. You look at the glow. The glow looks back with the same indifference it has always shown. You pull up. You bank right. You do not look back. Coming back to the landing area for the last time, you fly over the city of Pripyat. You have seen it many times from the air in the weeks of the operation. The empty city, the apartment blocks with their dark windows, the streets with no one in them, the fairground with the Ferris wheel that never opened. From 200 meters, it looks like a model of a city rather than a city. Too neat, too regular, too empty. From this height, you can see the school playgrounds, the basketball courts, the parks, all of them empty and still. You can see the apartment where someone's bread is still on the table, and someone's winter coat is still in the wardrobe, and someone's bicycle is still against the wall. From up here, you can see all of it at once, the whole empty city, the whole stopped life, the whole consequence of the wrong light in the wrong reactor. You go home. Not immediately. There is decontamination. There is medical monitoring.
There is the process of leaving an operational zone that has been your world for weeks and returning to a world that has continued without you, that does not know what you have seen or what you have been doing, or what the glow looks like from 200 meters. The train home takes 2 days. You sleep for most of it. Not the sleep of exhaustion exactly. You have been sleeping throughout the operation, the body insisting on its recovery, regardless of what the mind is processing. A different sleep. The sleep of transition, of a body and mind that is moving between two states and using the movement to reorganize. Your wife meets you at the station. She looks at you with the specific attention of a person who knows you well enough to read the difference between the you who left and the you who has returned. She looks at you for a moment. She does not ask questions immediately. She takes your bag. She says, "You look thin." You say, "The food was not very good." She says, "Come home." You go home. The apartment is the apartment. Your things are where you left them. The familiar smell of the apartment. The familiar sounds of the building. The familiar view from the kitchen window. All of it the same. All of it exactly as it was. You stand in the kitchen and you look out the window. The sky is ordinary. No glow. Just the ordinary sky above an ordinary city on an ordinary evening. You are surprised by how long you look at it, looking for the thing that is not there. In the years after the operation, some of the helicopter crews develop health problems. The relationship between the problems and the doses is studied and contested in the way that such relationships are always studied and contested when the institution that created the exposure has an interest in the outcome of the study. Some pilots receive recognition, some receive compensation, some receive neither. The logbooks with the dosimeter readings are in archives somewhere. Some have been declassified. The numbers in the logbooks, however inaccurately recorded, are there. 63 passes, 3 seconds each. The wrong light from the wrong place, seen from above, 63 times. It is still there. Not literally. You are home. The reactor is 400 kilometers away and the sarcophagus is being built over it, and the glow is being contained. The glow you see when you close your eyes is not the reactor. It is the memory of the reactor, the specific blue-white of the Cherenkov radiation, steady and sourceless, coming from below you during the 3 seconds of each pass. The memory is very precise, more precise than most memories. Most memories degrade with time, the details softening, the edges blurring, the specific sensory information fading into a general impression. This memory does not degrade. It is as specific now as it was on the first pass. The color, the steadiness, the scale of the opening from 200 meters, the slight pitch change from the building's turbulence, the dosimeter in your peripheral vision, doing what dosimeters do. You wonder why this memory stays sharp when others fade. You do not have a scientific answer. You have a working theory, which is that the mind keeps sharp the memories that it considers unresolved. The memories that have not yet been classified, filed, integrated into the general archive of experience. The glow is not integrated. The glow remains in active processing because the mind does not yet know where to put it. It does not fit any existing category. It is not fire. It is not beautiful. Not exactly, though it has a quality that the word beautiful applies to in some register. It is not terrifying, not in the way of immediate danger. It is simply itself, the specific light of a specific physical process happening in a specific place at a specific moment in history. You saw it 63 times. Nobody else saw it exactly as you saw it, from exactly that angle, at exactly that altitude, in exactly those 3 seconds. It was yours. The glow was yours. You carry it. Close your eyes. 200 meters, 3 seconds. The glow is blue-white and steady. It is not fire. You saw it 63 times. Nobody else saw it exactly as you saw it. A note of history. Soviet military helicopter crews began flying missions over the Chernobyl reactor building on April 27, 1986, the day after the explosion. The initial missions were reconnaissance passes to assess the damage. Within days, the mission shifted to dropping material into the open reactor core to suppress the fire and reduce radiation release. The materials dropped included sand, lead, boron, dolomite, and clay in varying combinations as the scientists' understanding of the most effective suppression strategy evolved. The total amount of material dropped by helicopter into the reactor over the course of the operation was approximately 5,000 tons. Later analysis determined that much of this material did not actually land in the core, but instead landed on the surrounding roof and structure, and that the beneficial effect of the airdrops was smaller than originally claimed. The helicopter crews flew at altitudes of approximately 200 meters above the reactor. At this altitude, the metal walls of the aircraft provided minimal shielding against gamma radiation from the open core. The rotor wash from hovering helicopters dispersed radioactive particles from the core into the surrounding air, which the crews then flew through on their approach and departure routes. Helicopter pilots and crews received significant radiation doses during the operation. The stated dose limits were frequently exceeded. Recording practices varied. Some crews recorded lower doses than their instruments showed. Others recorded accurately. The health effects on the helicopter crews in subsequent years have been documented, but the precise relationship between doses and health outcomes is complicated by the difficulties of accurate dose reconstruction and by political and institutional interests that have influenced how the data has been interpreted and reported. On October 2, 1986, an Mi-8 helicopter crashed near the reactor building after its tail rotor struck a construction crane cable. All 4 crew members, pilot Major Vorobyev, co-pilot Captain Unitsky, flight engineer Sergeant Cherenkov, and a dosimetry specialist, were killed. The crash occurred during what was by then a routine operational pass. The deaths are documented in Soviet accident records. The 4 men are among the most directly verifiable casualties of the Chernobyl response operations. The Cherenkov radiation visible above the open reactor core, the blue-white glow described by helicopter crews and by observers on the ground, was caused by charged particles from the radioactive decay process moving through air at speeds greater than the speed of light in air. This produces a characteristic blue glow that is well documented in nuclear physics. It is not fire and it does not require heat to produce. It is a direct visible signature of intense radioactive decay. The helicopter operation was eventually wound down as the sarcophagus construction progressed and covered the open core. The total number of helicopter flight operations over the reactor during the response period is documented in Soviet military records, though the full records have not been publicly released. Based on available accounts, individual pilots flew between 10 and over 100 passes over the reactor during the operation. Next, the doctor